Good morning and welcome to this week's Jump recruitment discussion. And this week we're talking about a 90-day plan and implementing a 90-day strategy to help you finish this year on a high and enter 2025 on the front foot. Talking about sort of strategies and plans, it's always hard to grab stats and statistics on that. And some of the stats that I read, I wasn't believing, so I'm not going to jump into them, which gives us more time to talk and more time to talk about what the things that we want to sort of talk about on here. So I'm going to jump in with the first question and see what this brings up, because I think this will sort of set the process up and where we're going. So Dave and Paul, I'm going to throw it straight at you and see where we are. So what are the key indicators that recruitment agencies should focus on during the next 90 days to ensure that they have a strong finish in 2024?
Howard, I don't know whether we can go on. There are no stats.
Yeah, no, I'm a bit thrown by that. I normally
I'm
doze
sat here,
off at
Paul,
this
thinking,
point.
hold on, we need some stats.
But what it normally gives you is you time to read the questions that I sent out about 4 weeks ago that you haven't read before. So yeah,
You've let us down, Stato. So we'll have to just drive on. Actually, so it's a very good question, Howard, because obviously we're hurtling towards the general election, and the news out this morning about the economy was pretty interesting. I mean, we have a present government that are claiming that the economy is recovering. It seems that if there is growth, it's pretty slow. But there is a definite view that once we get beyond the election and then into the back end of this year, things should slowly improve. That seems to be consistent. We saw at a conference last week, Neil Carberry talking about that very point, that the REC believe that there'll be some improvements as we get on through the year and the country knows where it is regarding the government and its policies. So I think we're kind of in this position of, I wouldn't say inertia, but this kind of quiet period before the election. Then we're all hoping that things will start to tip and we'll start to see more activity from employers and candidates. And I think if you look then, step back from that current situation economically, and you look at what the next 3 months might do for us, I've reason, let's hope, optimistic reason to believe that the market will start picking up. And I think that on that premise, our clients, we talk to them all the time about this, need to be prepared for what we hope will be increased activity. And the way that needs to be done, if you're looking at the next 90 days, is to really start to plot which particular organizations we need to be in front of, the companies that we need to be talking to now in order to be part and parcel of their plans as the rest of the year starts to unfold, and hopefully we gain momentum as the year starts to progress. My view, and I've been passing this on to all of my clients, is that we need to be out really heavily in front of clients, both current and lapsed, and of course be lead generating. So if you're looking, and we'll come to this point about things we need to be doing over the next 90 days, identifying target clients, and some of those targets will be existing clients, is essential. And I think a real effort, an absolute major effort, boulder moving effort over the next 90 days to really get in front of customers, potential customers, lapsed clients, and start talking about their plans towards the end of the year and 25. Because if we're led to believe what we're hearing, activity should be apparent fairly soon. And it takes probably 8 to 13 weeks from client meetings generally to start to see any kind of activity. You don't normally get to see clients and then instantly find that business picks up. It's a period of time after. So next 90 days should be heavy client activity.
Yeah, I agree. I sort of jotted down three things, Howard. Right people, right training, right clients. You need to look at your team of people, however many they are, 3, 5, 20, 50, whatever, look at them and say, is this the team that's going to help me accelerate my business in the next 90 days and onwards towards the rest of the year? And if you look at that team and think there's weaknesses, there's areas for development, there's areas for training, then establish what those areas for training are, get that booked in quickly so that they can perform, that they can learn, they can develop whatever the skills that they need to be superior performers. If you've got people there that just aren't performing and you know you know that they're not the right people, then you've got a chance to refresh your sales team, and it's not just about sales, it's across the business. Refresh that and get ready to make sure you're on the right foot. And then the last one is the right clients. And some of the clients you're trading with are ones that perhaps you shouldn't be trading with because they're either low margin, they don't accept the value that you present to them, and that your work could be better served elsewhere. So I think under those three headings, right people, right training, right clients, you can make some decisions to make sure you're in the best possible state for the next 90 days and onward.
It was interesting. I was with a client yesterday doing some management training, 15 managers in a room, reasonably large recruitment agency. And we were talking about this very subject, about the next 90 days. And we were talking about what that would look like and where they would go. And the first thing we started to think about is exactly what you guys are talking about there. It's about going out and seeing your clients and then understanding what your capability and capacity is to deliver to those clients. But then it was looking at the makeup of your team. So the right people, have you got the right place? Where there were certain offices which had the revolving door, so they had a very high attrition, so they had to do something about that. There was other offices that were performing poorly, but there was a lot of offices where they just had a lot of steady eddies in those offices that had a reasonably good client base, but weren't bringing new clients to them. So I think there's that comment about, having a look at your buying clients, having a look at your lapsed clients, and then looking at the gap between the buying clients and lapsed clients for the targets that you want to hit, because that's the new client base that you need to be building to start to deliver. So then you start to think about how do you improve your capability and capacity to deliver to the clients that you've already got. But then how do you then start to build your capability and capacity to bring new clients into your business? So I think it's all about looking at all those areas, setting a 90-day sprint out, embedding that with your employees so they know what that sprint looks like, outlining the mission of the sprint and what are the objectives over 30, 60, and 90 days, and have clarity around the strategy that you're talking about and how you're going to execute it. So we can talk all about what our clients do, but without that clarity of strategy and how you're going to execute it, then it means nothing. And I think you've got to make sure that you bring your team on board with that to drive it forward. So let's flip this question then. So how can agencies balance the need for immediate results with the importance of long-term planning and strategy? Because thinking about it, 90 is immediate results almost, but how can we flip the importance for long-term planning and strategy and the immediateness?
I mean, this is the question. It's not just the one that we raise here today. This is the same question that you look at virtually all the time. And I think one of the problems we have in our industry, and it's an understandable one, is that naturally we're laser focused, and understandably, on making placements, getting contractors, temps working, producing revenues day in, day out, week in, week out. And it's always been the nature of our industry. Last Monday's figures are history. What's happening next Monday, and I don't think that's ever going to change. But as highly experienced people ourselves in the industry, I mean, doing this for nearly 50 years, I always, even now, say to my clients, you're only as good as last week's numbers, or indeed this Monday's numbers. It's very difficult to move away from that focus, especially during very tough economic times. We have to squeeze every penny out of every opportunity. So it's, for me, an understandable predicament. But the problem, I think, for lots of people is squirreling away the time to do the stuff we just made reference to, which is to put the hard yards in now that will give you the benefits of client-based growth, developing temp numbers, picking up new opportunities, embedding ourselves into existing clients in a stronger, more concrete fashion. All of those things take time. I think it comes down to something very important. We're probably going to touch on it in the next question, and that's about what are the priorities and who do you deploy to look at those priorities? Who's best to do what? If you only look at what's sitting in front of you, i.e. today's placements, today's vacancies, today's assignments, and you're only ever looking just a few yards in front of you, you're not going to grow your business. And as I said, it's perfectly understandable. We need desperately to be making money at the moment during these challenging periods of time. But at the same time, if we're right and things start improving, please God, towards the end of the year, we do need to be out client-based developing, and that's for sure. We haven't even mentioned, but I'll raise it now, that if we're going to be out drumming up new business, we'll be focused on candidate delivery. We need to be starting to, as you might say, put stock on the shelves. Make sure the engagement with our candidate database and our activity on social media is heightened as well. How do you balance the two things? It's not easy, especially if you're a solopreneur or you have a very small recruitment business. There are not too many people you can delegate tasks to. You can look at outsourcing. Certainly, some of our clients do that very successfully. If you're a slightly larger business, then I do think it's about strategically looking at the talent in your business. You made reference to this, Howard, in your training. And who have you got? And Dave mentioned it. Who have you got? What are their skill sets? Can we put time in every day to do the things in the future for the future that are going to make a difference? Aside from 100% laser focus on the now, you do have to do that. It's really important. And I do think, to your points, guys, it's really important that we get people using the skill sets that they are most capable of using. We're using their talents rather than trying to push square pegs into round holes. So who's got great BD skills? Who's outstanding in your business, in front of customers, in front of candidates? Who are those brilliant people that are the rainmakers, and who are the other people, the delivery consultants? How do we define the two, and how do we deploy their skill sets to ensure that we have the correct balance as far as our workload is concerned?
Yeah, I think we've said this before. I think pre-COVID, the world of work was such that long term was 3-4 years. You looked ahead 3 or 4 years to see where things were. The world of work has changed. We're in a new era of work. We've got a new approach. Our clients, our staff all expect different things. Instead of long term being 5 years, long term now can be 5 months or 6 months. Instead of short term being 5 or 6 months, short term can be 5 or 6 days. Everything is faster, and that's the world in which we live in. So anybody sitting down to look at the next 90 days, if you haven't got a long term plan for the next 6 months to 12 months, say, or to the end of the year, I would encourage you to spend at least one of those 90 days working on a long term plan which sees you through to the end of the year. Before you start off for the next 90 days, make sure that the destination that you know for the end of the year is written down, that your staff have bought into it. I had an old boss, Dennis Linscott, bless him, who set up Intertech with me years and years ago. And he used to say always, if you're 5% off at the beginning, you'll be 50% off at the end. And the end for many recruitment companies is in 5-6 months, because that's as far as we can see with the changing in the market. So I'd encourage you to spend the first part of your 90 days looking at a long-term plan, writing it down, sharing with it, involving your staff, and get that done.
So I think it's really sort of interesting, isn't it, sort of thinking about what we're talking about? Because I always sort of think about, you can't, as you've said, match the two. We must learn not only to have that eyes down strategy of looking at what's today, but we need to sort of have that eyes up strategy, which is what you're talking about, Dave. And I think what you've got to think is that, results just don't happen overnight, but results are created from sort of consistent activity and doing that consistent activity very, very well. So I think if we start to think about what does success look like from a consistency point of view, and what are you doing about those things to create consistency? And so therefore in your 90-day plan, your 180-day plan, your 3-year plan, etc., what are you measuring? Are you measuring your input and your output? Because if you're only measuring what you're putting in today, expecting it to deliver tomorrow, then you're going to be sorely sort of unhappy about the process that you've got. So I think we've got to start to measure the strategy and what it does, measure how we execute that strategy, and then start to think about what brings us consistent results. And I say consistency happens over a longer period of time, not a short period of time. And so if you want to start to accelerate out of the downturn as the market starts to turn, then you've got to get your processes right. But you've also got to think that those processes might not bring you financial reward for another 3, 6, maybe 12 months sometimes. And that's the bit that we've got to get into our heads, is that if we're only ever going to farm the crop today and not farrow the field for tomorrow, then nothing will grow tomorrow. And that's the bit that we've got to start to think about. It's a long-term thought process, not just a short-term. And this is what we see, all three of us, we see this all the time, that a lot of agencies purely focus on today and never focus on tomorrow. And that's a huge problem that they've got when it starts to come, that they don't understand that some clients are going to stop, some agents are going to leave their business, that the agencies they've got aren't creating new business, and therefore that will fall foul over a certain period of time. So you've got to have that short-term lens and a long-term view of where you're going and the destination that you're going. So we started to link into there what common mistakes do recruitment agencies make during short-term planning sprints, and how can they avoid them?
Well, I mean, just to pick up on the point you've made, and I think it's worth making this statement, that it does take time, doesn't it, to build new business? As you've said correctly, Howard, you at the beginning of any kind of business development exercise, if it's a 90-day sprint, in the early stages, you can often feel like you're banging your head against a brick wall. And I've had conversations even yesterday with clients who are talking about the fact that they've been doing a lot of client meetings recently, as I've been pushing them to do, but have seen at this point limited outcomes. And my advice was, don't give up, because I think that the natural mindset is to think, well, I've been to see so-and-so company, or maybe I've seen them a couple of times, there's still nothing. There's nothing going to happen. And you get into that very negative mindset. No matter what I do, no matter how hard I try, nothing's going to break. It's the market, it's this, it's the other. And then people, as it were, psychologically give up. And I think that transfers into physically give up. They stop going out, talking to clients, because they think it's a waste of time. I would always say that, it's always that real cliche about darkest before the dawn. You've got to keep trying. We often talk about, I think you said it last week, Howard, that most consultants give up when they talk to clients after 2 or 3 attempts. When we know that sometimes it's the 6th, the 8th attempt that finally breaks the back of the problem. I think that applies to client meetings too. You cannot give up. You've got to keep trying, got to keep going. It is difficult at the moment. There is a level of inertia out there in the market, but the effort you put in now, as you've said, guys, will make a big difference by the time we get towards September and October. And this point about being resilient, being consistent, believing that ultimately things will change, believing that you have the solutions that are going to make a difference for your client. That belief system means you just keep going, keep trying. And often, and we've all experienced it, when you least expect things to change, suddenly it does. And it's not just a few things. It's a bit like London buses, more than one come along at the same time. But you've got to keep your colleagues motivated. You've got to keep encouraging them to keep trying, even when it feels like nothing is going to break. Because trust me on this point, it will change, it will improve, but it takes time. And we've got to work really hard at maintaining motivation with our people and spirit with our people. Try not to worry them nor get them too anxious when we don't see the immediate results we'd really like to see.
So, Helen, I'm going to come back to your question. Dave, I want you to answer this question, then I'll answer, and then we're going to try pushing to Helen's question as well, that she's just posted as well.
Yeah, let me just answer quickly then, so we can capture Helen's. The biggest mistake I see is actually in leaders. And it's leaders' disillusionment, where they put in a plan for the business and they get disillusioned with their people because their people just don't want it as much as they do. If you run a business, if you own a business, you will know exactly this feeling. It's your business. You've done everything you think you can to inspire, motivate, cajole, coach, mentor your people. And then in those 90 days, they just don't seem to want it as much as you do. And the mistake is you then get discouraged. So if that applies to you, can I just encourage you to keep persevering, keep going with the messages, keep believing in your people, keep doing the things that you know that's right. The reality is most of those people don't want it as much as you do. That's just the reality. So your job as a leader is to keep inspiring and encouraging and cajole them, and not make the mistake of just giving up and thinking, this is just too hard. And they don't want it like I do. They will come back, and the ones that won't, well, then you know what you've got to do.
So I think I'm going to challenge that comment slightly, Dave, and give it a slightly different twist. And I think sometimes that the management are a little bit too far away from the coalface and don't actually understand what's actually happening on the market in the marketplace. So their strategy is unable to be implemented by the consultant. So we have a strategy problem and then we have an execution problem because they may be executing as well as they can, but still not hitting the results. So we've got to look at that from there. I think the other big mistake that lots of companies do is they try and do everything in a very short period of time and therefore never actually achieve anything. So I think they need to be able to decide what's urgent and important and focus what's urgent and important rather than focus on what might be urgent but not important. And I think what we tend to do is we don't see people delegating the critical stuff out to other people. And I think the other thing is not knowing what the strategy actually is and how you're going to execute that strategy. So if you want to close the strategy to execution gap, okay, you've got to understand what your processes are. Will they create consistent results? Will they create motivation? And if we start to think about what Helen's asked there as a question is, how do you remotivate yourself if you lead a small team, be in recruitment for over 34 years and feel like I've lost my mojo, only be in the last 2 weeks, think it's because we've been bonkers busy and now it's a bit quieter and now I'm much better when I'm busy. Does everyone else feel the same? And I think everyone feels the same, that they feel, when they're busy, they feel productive. But are you being a busy fool or are you just being busy for the sake of it? Or are you genuinely busy? And I think the thing sometimes when you start to measure things, I talk to a lot of clients, we're really busy. Well, what's your placement ratios? It's we place 2 out of 10, we place 3 out of 10 permanent jobs that we take on, etc. Well, that's not busy. Busy is when you're filling 7 out of 10 jobs. That's when you're busy. And I think what we've got to decide is what is urgent and what is important and what's not urgent and not important and start to work those things. So what Paul said right at the beginning in question was sometimes you've got to reject certain clients because they are stopping you actually being busy and focus on the ones where you're actually going to make money rather than focus on the ones that are just keeping you busy at the same time. And that's where your strategy starts to come in. So it's all about that execution of that strategy, developing that. And I think to keep your mojo high and motivate yourself, you've got to start to celebrate all the little wins, all the things that you forget to celebrate when you're busy. Opening a new client, going on a client meeting, getting commitment from a client, signing terms and conditions, getting a job on, getting CVs out, all these little things that we forget to celebrate when we're busy, okay, are the things that we should be celebrating now because these are the things that lead us to placements and lead us to revenue.
Can I just say to Helen, it's absolutely okay to feel like that because, as you've seen from the responses in the chat box, we're all with you because we've all been there. And so thank you for sharing that question. It is frustrating, but you've been in business for 34 years, Helen. That's fantastic. So you know your stuff. So keep going, and we look forward to hearing from you down the line that things are getting stronger.
And I think some of that is about, David, I think, and this is not us trying to sell our services. This is about having that someone who you can be accountable to, because sometimes as a business owner, you haven't got that accountability. And I think having that person that you can bounce off, have a conversation with, moan at, etc., that's going to listen and then help rather than being in the thick of it where they sometimes can't see the wood for the trees. And I think that is a really important part at this time of year or this time in the marketplace, having someone that's going to keep you accountable and keep you on your toes and keep you motivated to perform.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So moving forward, what are the best practices for setting achievable and impactful goals for 90 days? And what would you prioritize?
Good question. I mean, one of my clients pointed me towards a thing called the Eisenhower matrix. You can find it online. It's really easy to understand, and it partitions tasks into 4 quadrants: important, not important. And the important line at the top is into 2 areas. It's urgent, so these are tasks with deadlines or consequences, the things you absolutely need to do immediately, and the not urgent, although still important. So these are tasks with unclear deadlines that contribute to long-term success, a bit like, well, in fact, exactly like what we've been saying now. So you could argue very strongly that what's urgent are the things that you need to do today, which are to get vacancies qualified correctly, and obviously placements made, and to improve your temp numbers and the margins and so on and so on. All the things we are laser focused on, and the not urgent. In other words, it's not going to happen today. The points we've been making, you still schedule, so you make sure that you are doing things every day, every week that are going to contribute to your long-term success. And at the bottom of the matrix are the not importance. And on that level, you're talking about delegation, tasks that must get done, but don't require your specific skill set. So other people may be able to do them for you. And you can divest yourself of those issues and challenges to others who, in fact, may do them better than you, and will be grateful for the opportunity, because often when you delegate to people, they get the chance to learn and feel, I think, grateful in a way that you trust them to do the job. It will help, obviously, staff morale, and or you ultimately delete things. There are an awful lot of distractions in our industry and running a business, lots of things that come across our desks every day that we feel we need to do, and we get ourselves embedded in those tasks, and they waste time, and they make no difference whatsoever to the ability of our vehicle going any faster. So I think, we often use that cliche, does it make the car go faster, when we talk about tasks? Is it going to make us move quicker? Are we going to get towards our goals any quicker if we do this today? And a lot of the things that happen daily running a business make no difference, frankly, to the profitability of your business in the short or the long term. So it's really important, I think. Have a look at that, the Eisenhower matrix. I think it takes all of about 2 minutes to understand it. And when you're looking at the things that you need to do, perhaps just consider how you could put those tasks into one of those quadrants going forward.
Yeah, I think a little tip for everybody. Don't talk about the market. Only focus on the things that you can change. Focus on the training. Focus on the KPIs if you use KPIs for your business. Focus on the things that you and your business and your team can do. The market, you are not going to be able to change in the next 90 days, and some would argue in the next 6 months. Yeah, so don't talk about the market. Talk about your business, your people, encourage them and inspire them. Look at the data. You've heard me say this many times. Let the data decide. Look at what the output is, where that's going. In 90 days, as a business leader, you've got the time to focus on that and not worry about what the market does. Because if you do what you know you can do, you will grow.
So I think it's an interesting conversation, this. I think it's an interesting question. I think it all boils down to a couple of things. The first thing I'd look at is clarity. So is your plan clear? Does everybody understand where they fit into the plan? Do they understand what that is? And that means sometimes having a plan that's accessible to all, so they can see it, they can read it. So it's not just a plan that's in someone's head or made up or, locked away in a drawer somewhere. It's a physical plan that they can see. And then the second side of that is that focus. So the key is communication. Keep the communication high. So have defined time frames, work to people's strengths, get everyone knowing their job and what the impact on the overall objective is. I would be having constant weekly catch-ups on the progress, and set an accountability charter. Set an accountability charter of what you're expecting people to do and people to deliver, and look at that on a regular basis, weekly basis. Then you can start to see if someone's either succeeding or potentially if someone's having a problem. The business can react quickly to that. And that means that we've got to develop, a progressive culture where people talk about their delivery, talk about the problems that they're having, and they get the support from the other people. And I think you've got to empower people to prevent ineffective outcomes. The less you empower your team, the more ineffective they become. So you've got to empower your team to deliver. And I think you've got to work to people's strengths, and therefore having pure clarity around what you're trying to do and in the timescales that you're trying to do those things, and keeping people accountable drives the business forward. Goes back to the question before, it's all about then celebrating those successes. What I was talking about, urgent and not important, was exactly what Paul brought out as the Eisenhower thing is, focus what's important and urgent, not what's not important and not urgent, which lots of people do.
Just a quick point, just to finish this point, Howard, and that is that, I spent a lot of time yesterday in a board meeting talking about going back to basics. In this particular instance, with this particular client, their conversion ratios have decreased quite a bit recently. Interestingly, one of their senior staff said they didn't think they needed to go back to basics. But when we dug in and looked at quite a number of the placements that had fallen out recently, counter offers and so forth, I could see a whole range of areas where the basics, if deployed correctly, would have prevented some of those people falling out and not starting. Really review your basics. I know we often talk about more advanced sales techniques, and that's important. But I would say one of the things you really need to look at over the next 90 days is review your processes, review the basics. It's the basics and the detail that make the difference in our industry. Get that right, you can build on top of that. But I do feel sometimes that we take our eye off the ball, we allow bad habits to creep in, and mistakes get made. We then say nothing to do with us, it's the market. When in fact, when you are really self-critical, you can always find areas to improve. So back to basics, back to processes, double check, be very clear that you're comfortable and confident that we're working in a diligent and disciplined fashion.
So that goes down to the conversation that we've been having quite a lot just recently, is about your strategy and the execution of that. So is your strategy right, and can you execute it? If you're executing it well and you're not getting the results, have a look at the strategy. However, if your strategy is correct and you're not getting results, have a look at your execution, how it's working. And that's training, development, looking for the gaps, etc. What you've just explained there.
Yeah.
So in our opinion then, why do 90% of recruitment agencies in the UK have fewer than 10 heads, and what can they do to scale effectively?
Well, the first thing is you've got to want to scale effectively. And I think one of the reasons why, and this is not a criticism at all, but one of the reasons why a lot of people never really progress beyond, as you've put randomly in there, 10 heads, why they don't do that is they don't want to. So I think the first thing is to establish, do you want to scale up? It's not right for everybody. It's not what everybody wants. I speak to people who say they're very comfortable with just a few people in their business, or even solopreneurs who work on their own, or with just one or with a resourcer. So I think, it's the mindset of the individual. Some people are simply not comfortable building a bigger business. And if that's the case, that's fine. Max out with the resources that you already have. But I think in terms of those people that do have a goal, an aspiration to grow a more sizable organization, I think the reason why people don't do that is to some extent, in our experience, I think you'll agree with me, it's a lack of confidence. It's also a lack of know-how. I mean, the reason, frankly, that we, Jump Advisory Group, are in existence and on a daily basis work alongside recruitment business directors and owners is because, with all due modesty, we have done that. We have scaled up big businesses. We've scaled up businesses. And if you haven't done it before and you're not aware of how to do it, you need experienced people like us to help you, because we understand very clearly what it takes to do it. And we know how to avoid the risks and the perils that go alongside it. It's also about timing. And I think one of the reasons people have not done any of that recently in terms of scaling up is perfectly understandable. It's a tough market, and understandably, people are keeping a very close eye on costs. I think there's a whole range of reasons here. One of the good things, if I can turn this on its head, about the recruitment industry is that actually there's nothing wrong whatsoever with having a business that has less than 10 people. There's no reason why you have to scale up. But obviously, there is a limit to the amount of profitability you're going to get with a smaller business. As I say, it comes down to the mindset of the individual. But if you are somebody that wants to scale up your business, then in my opinion, timing is important, but it's also about previous knowledge, knowing how to do it. And if you don't have that, it's engaging people that do know how to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Paul, you're so right in that first part of the answer to the question. It isn't for everybody. Recruitment offers people a good living, whether they've got 4, 5, 6 people. I've met many, many business owners who have gone from 5 to 15 and said, Dave, we made more money when we had 5 than when we have 15, because now we've got so much more staff and it's just more difficult. And there's almost that bit of pushing through that to get to 15, 20, 30, and then you've got quite a scalable business. But that isn't for everybody. We all work hard, we all work long hours, whether we're running a business for 2 or 3 people or whether we're running a business for 20. It's just a different dynamic and the roles become different. So I think a lot of the reason why people don't choose to scale their businesses is simply because they don't want to. Then the ones that do, they've got to have the courage and the belief in themselves and the belief in their people to push through that difficult phase, which is often, in terms of number of heads, it's often somewhere between 5 and 15. And most businesses aren't that and don't want to be that. But if you are on that journey, and as you said, Paul, work with people who have been there and done it and can help you, to encourage you, to hold you accountable, as Howard said, when you go through those pitfalls, because there's lots of pitfalls as you grow between 5 and 15. But then you've got the processes and the basics in place to then accelerate away.
I think it's interesting that the reason I asked the question was very simple, is that as you start to accelerate out of a downturn, there's an opportunity to take market share. And the opportunity to take market share then is about bringing people in. And therefore, you've got to start to look at your capability and capacity to deliver to what your clients want. So you may have lots of clients that are starting to come back really, really quickly. Therefore, can you deliver? And therefore, getting the right people in. And I think what you two have said is absolutely right. Is, some people don't want to grow and scale, which is fine. Some people do and lack the capability and knowledge how to get beyond that. And that's all about putting the right infrastructure in place and recruiting people at the right time so it doesn't slow the business down. And therefore, it's about having the right platform when you bring people in, the right recruitment process, onboarding process, training process, etc. But it's also having the right number of clients and opportunities that can filter or help that person filter into the business without damaging the bottom line, to say. And I think a lot of people get that wrong and really struggle with that. And then it's back to that question about when you bring somebody in, what's your obligation to them? Is it a 2-day obligation? Is it a week obligation? Is it a 3-day obligation? What is it to get those people up and running? And the ones that we see that scale properly have a proper training development plan over 3, 6, 12, 18 months. So again, going back into this process, they have 90-day sprints for their people to help them train and accelerate, not just a 2-day sprint, right, you're now a fully fledged recruiter, off you go and fill. So I think there's lots to be said about the strategies and execution of those strategies and building the infrastructure in. So last 2 questions. Okay, this is going to be an interesting question because next we've got a webinar and we're bringing in Access Group and a couple of IT people to discuss what's going on in IT and what will help people. So what role do you think technology plays in supporting a successful 90-day sprint for recruitment agencies?
Oh, such a tough question because there's so much new technology in our industry now. I'm going to be really basic here because I think a lot of people listening today have not necessarily invested in the newest tech for a variety of reasons, not least cost. I'm going to talk about CRMs because they're by definition it's technology, and some of the CRMs are really outstanding. We joke about the fact that often people say their CRMs aren't very good, but it's almost always down to user error. If you put rubbish in, you get rubbish out. And I think that CRMs can be enormously helpful in being a part of the 90-day sprint, particularly when we're looking at information on clients, notes, details, reminders as to when to go back to processes when we are going to be speaking to our clients. Also, and very importantly, our candidates, because as we keep on saying, we've been saying for years now, we consistently advertise for new candidates when we already have most of the candidates we'll ever need sitting on our database and fail to engage with those people for the duration of their career cycles. I think it comes down to the points we were making earlier. If you want to talk about technology, can we also add in the phrase process? Because I think those two things are interlinked. Underpinning any successful business is a very strong level of discipline related to processes, related to the methods of using technology, how we store information, how we use technology to help us to engage with clients, engage with candidates consistently, in an engaging fashion. All of those things are part and parcel of what we do. We've talked a lot about the development of AI over the last year or two, all of which is here to stay and is going to become more and more sophisticated, but it releases us as human beings to use our natural instincts, our natural emotional intelligence, to spend more time with candidates, more time with clients, to do the things that we came into recruitment to do in the first instance. I think there's a combination of making sure that whatever technology we have in our businesses, we use to full effect. That's processes. And then making sure that the time we gain by using those systems effectively is used effectively to be having a deeper, as it were, interactions with clients and candidates. Back to the beginning of this conversation.
Yeah, I think there's so much tech out there, isn't there? And sometimes as leaders, it's confusing as to know what's the next new thing. Is it right for my business? How do I implement it? Does it connect with something else? I would just encourage us to continue to look at our processes. If we're looking at the next 90 days, look at our processes, make sure that we're doing the things we should be doing well. And if you know that there is tech out there, and maybe join us next week to find out what's on the horizon. If you think there's tech out there that can make those processes faster and more efficient and give you some more time back, and you know what to do with that time, either some more sales, more client meetings, whatever it may be, then consider some new tech. But in the next 90 days, it is unlikely that you're going to buy a piece of new tech, implement it, and see results from it. So if we're just looking at the 90 days, you may be best looking at what you've got. But if there is something there that you think, actually, that will help me, I know how to use it, I know how to implement it, I know how to make it work, or I've got somebody who can help me, then that's fine to consider that as well. But actually, to Paul's point earlier, focus on what you do, what your processes are, and do them as well as you can. If there's a tech enabler to help that better, then consider it. But for 90 days, I carry on doing what you're doing, and for the most part, and don't get derailed spending 3 or 4 days of the next 90 days looking at all the new tech that's out there.
It's interesting because we talk a lot about tech, and I do think it is paramountly important that if you've got tech, before you start to even consider new tech, is learn how to work your current tech, because you're probably not getting much out of it. The other thing I think that a lot of people do when we start to get into hard times and it's a hard market is we start to analyze everything, and what that starts to create is paralysis, because we just can't move forward because we're waiting for more data to give us the answer. So I think what Paul was saying about going back to basics in skill set is go back to basics in your data sets as well. What data is important? What data generates businesses? And what data is it that you want to change? And once you can understand that, then you can start to measure your performance against that data and drive that. And as you know, your CRM can do that, your finance system can do that. And I think in this marketplace now, unless, as Dave said there, unless it's going to give you time back, then I wouldn't be spending money on it. I'd be spending money on developing my team to use the tech that you've got better and use their capabilities to get out and see your clients more. So last question, okay? I want this to be reasonably quick, okay? So can you share a success story from recruitment agencies that have implemented a 90-day sprint and have saw significant results? What were their measures?
Okay, well, I'm going to boast. All right, not for the first time. I know you're going to say something, so I'll get ahead of you on that point. I was asked by a client in the hospitality industry in London to come in and do a day course on business development. And I did that. And we had about 15 people in the room. And I spent a lot of time, as you can imagine, talking about the essential need to be out in front of clients. Bear in mind, it was hospitality. So it was the beginning of this year, around January, February, quieter periods generally for the hospitality industry. This was a business that had done very few client meetings, had lost their way with all of that, and their client base had shrunk. And here's the boast. I think I got a text message from the owner in about 2 weeks after the course to tell me that between his people, they'd then arranged something in the order of 160 client meetings. Now, I mean, obviously, it goes without saying that that generated a huge amount of new business, and they are sailing at the moment. I'm still working with the client, mentoring their people, and they're having a grand old time of it. I'm not saying I am the only reason for that, because God bless them, they listened and they did what we asked them to do. But if you're looking for a recent success story, an instant impact, that was it. And it comes right back full circle to what we started talking about at the beginning of this particular webinar.
Yeah, man, that's great stuff, Paul. And there's stories like that across the Jump clients. One of the things that I do with some of the clients I worked with and have done consistently since the beginning of this year is asking the owners to ask their staff, what are you going to stop doing in the next few weeks? Not what are you going to do more of, but what are you going to stop doing? Because we all get into habits. And in stopping doing certain things, it frees up time to do more. So 2 of those clients that I've spoken to have stopped doing wasteful things and have found out that actually they've got more time for more sales, they've sent out more candidates, they've had more meetings, and they can actually turn around and say, yeah, we've got better performance. Not exactly the same as yours, Paul, across 15, because for some of them, they're smaller businesses. But actually, they're just doing more of the right stuff and doing less of the stuff that actually doesn't make them any money. And they've seen results in that time.
It's interesting that I've got 2 clients that I started to work with about 18 months ago. The first was a half-day session where we actually put in a full strategy of what we wanted to achieve over the next 3 years, and then boiled that down to the first 90-day sprint. One of the clients is down the south coast. They've gone from a solo business, there's now 4 in the business. They are now quadrupled their gross profit, and they are now dropping around about 65% from the gross profit line onto the net profit line. But they're following the process. Next month, we're going to readdress that whole plan because we are now so far ahead of the plan. We're going to readdress the plan. The other person's based in London, and again, really, really stuck religiously to the plan. And her comment was all about is what you've done is stop me running ahead. And I always think about crawl, walk, run. And she said, I've now just got out the crawling stage, where if it had started before, I'd have been sprinting and falling over. And so it's kept her accountable. Yeah. And again, she's been able to grow her business and develop it because she's got short plans for 90 days, very few things in that for her to achieve while she's carrying on billing, and she's at 3 heads carrying on billing and driving from there. So it's all about sticking to the plan and having that accountability. They text me constantly, voice message constantly, email. So the communication side of that was really high to help us, keep them accountable to what they're doing. We haven't veered off the plan. And I think that's the critical thing. They haven't veered off the plan. They've stayed on that plan on a narrow channel and narrow focus and been able to achieve what we wanted to achieve. So, Paul and Dave, thank you very much. Ladies and gents, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next week, we have a really interesting conversation. Next week, we are going to bring in the people such as Access Group and other tech people, and we're going to talk about what technology is really going to help us in the future and what should we be thinking about our current technology. So join us next week. Thank you very much for this week, and I look forward to seeing you all again in the near future.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Take good care. Bye, everyone.